From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, this is a Headache Soul production. Welcome to Just the Tip-Sters, America's favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Morgan. With me today is my handsome and talented co-host, Joshua. I'll be your Uber driver this evening, Devin.
How was my rating? Did I get a 5-star rating?
I gave you a 10.
Yes.
I mean, it was in my car, but still.
Sure.
It was not clean.
Even though I didn't bring snacks.
No, you didn't have any mints or water for me, but I had a Mountain Dew Kickstart. Everything was good. If I did not know what a stand-up human being you were, now I know for sure because you took me to the airport and picked me up.
Oh, well, thank you.
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
I am very grateful.
LAX gets a bad rap. No,
because you know how to work the system.
Yeah, I guess.
You waited and yeah.
Yeah, I have it down now, and yeah, it's easy.
No, it's not.
Okay. It is easy if you know what you're doing, and I think a lot of people
How long it took you to get me, and then how long it took us to get the fuck out.
Okay, but that was all specifically. That was that night. Mm-hmm. It was all the arrivals landing at once,
right? And a holiday
because of all
weekend.
of it was a holiday weekend plus all the garbage with the computer systems.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh yeah, everything.
Oh no.
Your first flight was like 20 minutes early. Your second flight was like 25 minutes early, whatever. Mm-hmm. That was not standard.
An anomaly. Yeah.
Everything was delayed all day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Every airline or just Delta?
All over the airport. Yeah.
Okay, so I flew from.
It was a mess. All over the country.
All over the country.
Everything was a mess.
I heard absolutely zero about that.
Well,
the only thing I anticipated was my friend Lisa, whose husband worked in the tower at Cincinnati, said, "Oh, it might be more crowded because it's a holiday weekend."
Yeah.
But I got in. There was one person ahead of me in TSA pre. There was nobody. One person ahead of me checking their bag, and I waited 60 seconds. I mean, it was sure. Great. And then I have to say, sometimes you get like a fun pilot and sometimes you get like the straight ahead guy.
Right.
So from Cincinnati to Salt Lake City, and we were like 20, 25 minutes early, whatever. When we landed, he goes, we're in ahead of schedule. And he goes, we are the greatest. And then the whole cabin laughs, So when we're leaving, he's standing at the door, like smiling. And I always say thank you because
thanks for the ride. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, thanks for not killing us.
Right.
Thanks for the ride. Also, thanks for being, accomplished and not killing a big bunch of us.
Sure.
Denzel Washington. Fuck me. Anyway, so he's standing there. He was like, he had his ankles crossed and his arms crossed. He's like leaning against the cockpit
nice.
Door. His little hat's like kind of askew.
Yeah.
And I go, you are the greatest. And he's like, thank you. I mean, he was so cute. It was like probably 60 and it looked like 60-year-old model,
Sure.
He was the prototypical pilot.
Right.
And then, the second flight, I think it was the co-pilot who did the announcements who sounded like he worked at Kmart or something, like attention.
The blue light special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the captain was waiting, and I always say thank you. And he was like smiling too. But the dude who said, we're the greatest. I'm like, you are.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was very happy, but also very, very happy with my Uber driver because you didn't even attempt to sexually assault me. So thank you.
Oh, wow. There was a lot of traffic. Maybe next time.
It was an automatic. It's not like you had to shift gears. What the fuck? You had a free hand. I don't know what's wrong with you. Take the opportunity, Joshua.
That's it.
I'm highly disappointed. No, I was actually very grateful. Thank you for not sexually assaulting me.
Well, and thank you for the Tito's tacos on the
way
in.
My gosh, that was the least I could do. I've never been there. And, I was like, hey, everyone who goes to LAX says this is something you have to do. I've lived here 31 motherfucking years, never been there. So Joshua was my guide, my taco guide. And no, that's not.
That wasn't.
Nope. Don't. Why? God damn it. Anyway, it was really good dinner.
It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was very delicious. That was the least I could do is, pay you. I was going to say pay you in tacos, and I know what you'll do. You'll take that too.
Tito's, the tacos that we ate
famous
for dinner.
Famous tacos. Yes. That have been there a very long time, I guess.
Yeah, they've been there
Like
for a long
30 years or something, maybe.
oh,
Long time.
is it only 30?
Oh, no, I was just taking a stab. Might be 40,
Oh, I was thinking way longer, but
50, 80.
Sure.
Sure.
300 years.
300.
It was the taco stand
There's like a
before
guy in a
California was a
powdered
state.
wig, right? Making tacos. Like, God, I wish I could get out of these buckled shoes, right?
I hope somebody shows up for gold soon.
I keep making these fucking tacos. Nobody's eating them.
Nobody here.
Occasionally an Indian or some guy that looks like he's from Mexico stops by, but they never stay long. All right. I can't even take you anymore. All right. So just got back from Kentucky. It was a very fruitful trip. I extended it for 3 days because I had to talk to some coppers, and they were terrific. And we'll have a couple of really interesting episodes coming out of that. And yeah, I'm very grateful. I took a class. It was really fun. I learned a lot. I'm hoping to parlay that into something I can do where I can support myself financially instead of always borrowing money from Joshua.
I'm happy to help, but I'm excited. I'm excited about your new opportunities.
And thanks for the quarters
Yeah.
that you've given me.
Laundry money.
Yeah, exactly. And I have my own washer dryer. I just lie to you about it. Can I have 75 cents? I have to do a load of whites.
You hinted at your next ventures, and I'm super excited to see what comes up.
I hope I can do that. I really do hope I can do that. I'd like to go back in October. They have a 1-day, 1-credit class called like helping victims through the criminal justice system.
Oh,
and
sweet.
Yeah, I could take like a long weekend.
Oh, okay.
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday class.
And here's the part that I love the most. It's October 6th, which was Mark and Mai's anniversary.
Oh.
So I thought, I might make a weekend.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's way cool.
Yeah, I'd like to do. I don't know if I can swing it, but all right. So I'm just going to let the tipsters know the reason that things have been a little odd lately. Both Joshua and I were out of town at the same time, which is not the odd part. It was actually worked out beautifully, but this is the third motherfucking time we have recorded this episode. And the best part is Joshua will still not remember. He's going to be like, really?
Wait, what?
Mm-hmm. There was a 2-week gap, because we were both out of town. So I'm going to give that to you because you won't even remember what happened.
No, it's going to be a surprise.
Good.
Again.
Surprise.
Okay, let's do this one last time.
One last time. This is the last time. And it is in my mind, a phenomenal story. This came out in the New York Times by journalist Michael Wilson in April of 2019. And sometimes I'm very blessed that the tipsters give me great ideas for cases to cover or something that's personal to them or something they want to know about. But sometimes you accidentally trip on things and you're like, well, that's the most interesting thing I've read in a while. And this is one of those things. The article was entitled, "Her Prince Charming Turned Out to Be a Crazed Hitman on the Run." And I just am fascinated by this story. I think it's a bit of a cautionary tale about the judicial system. And there are some things that could have been answered that weren't, but it's just really one woman's story. And it's a good one. It's a sad one, but it's ultimately a good one. And she is such a phenomenal human being that she found the good in something really, really bad.
That's amazing.
It really is a great story. So Blanche Wright was a young girl who had a tough upbringing. Her mother had schizophrenia. She never knew who her father was. And her mom would occasionally leave her alone for days. Her mom wandered the streets. She sometimes would lock her in her bedroom. And then she finally was taken away by Children's Services, and her grandmother and some very not good uncles helped to raise her. The uncles didn't want to have a kid around, so they would chain her to a radiator.
Oh, geez.
And her grandmother was, older and didn't, have the strength to raise a young girl. She would sometimes be wandering around outside wearing just a diaper.
Oh, no.
So the neighbors reported that, and finally she's taken out of her grandmother's home and she was put in foster care. And that didn't go well either. It was an older couple, and the father was in his 60s and owned a dry cleaning store. It was when Blanche was about 8 that he started coming into her bedroom. She would wrap herself really tightly in sheets and try and keep quiet. And then he started taking her to the basement. And he would say, I'm going to teach you what not to do with boys.
Oh, God.
She had such a strong inner spirit that she talked herself out of her own body. She said, picture a radio with knobs and turn the dial and just turn it completely off. And that's how she described her mindset. She was like, this isn't me. This isn't happening to me. Her foster mother discovered what was happening, but then ended up blaming Blanche. And then when she was 13, her foster father came into her bedroom and climbed on top of her. And this time she resisted. And he grunted and gasped for air and then collapsed.
Oh, no.
The wife drove him to the hospital and then he died. And then she blamed Blanche for his death. She stopped speaking altogether. And then at age 16, she was sent to a group home. So there was one shining light in her life, and it was the woman who ran the group home. Her name was Miss Richardson, and she took Blanche on as her personal project. She would talk to Blanche constantly, and even though, Blanche wouldn't answer her, she would constantly give her praise, encouragement, and she began to say, you know what? There's no unsafe men in this house.
That's amazing.
A few years later, Blanche started to speak. So she got her, voice back. She's 16, and she goes to a friend's birthday party. This is a friend she had known for years. The friend had a brother she'd also known for years. He invited her into a bedroom and he raped her.
God.
She said, that's it, I'm done. She said she felt dirty. She gave up on the dreams that Miss Richardson had helped her to see. And she listened to the older women around her who said, men act that way because they love too much.
Oh, my God.
About a year later, she started dating the boy who raped her.
Oh, wow.
And then a year after that, she has a baby. And they live in an apartment of their own for a short period of time. But then she found needles in the bathroom and she learned he was shooting up, and she confronted him and he beat her so bad with an ironing board, she went unconscious.
Jesus.
So he is jailed later on because he had a fight with one of Blanche's uncles, and she took that opportunity. She took that opportunity and she took the baby and just left with whatever clothes she had on her back. And she moved in with a cousin, trying to kind of keep her life, secret. She heard that the baby's father was going to be out of jail soon and come looking for her. And she went to an aunt who was having a surprise birthday party for her. She was 20. And she meets there Willie Sanchez. So her aunt is like, hey, come on over. I am not feeling well. I need some help from you. And she walks in and it's like, happy birthday, surprise. Her aunt introduces her to this man, Willie Sanchez. He is an impeccably dressed man who says he's an attorney from Philadelphia.
Okay.
He always carried a briefcase. He wore a 3-piece suit. And she said he was unlike any man I've ever met. And she said, we talked and talked. And before the evening was over, he had told her aunt, I'd really like to talk to her more. So he's like courting her.
Cool.
So she turned 20 years old in 1979, and she just really didn't have a whole lot to celebrate. And she was struggling to stay afloat with her toddler son, living in her own apartment and hiding from his father, the little boy's father. And she knew he was getting out of jail soon. And Willie seemed like he was, promising something good in her life. Everything that happened in this story happened over a 71-day time period.
Oh,
Every single
wow.
thing from November of 1979 to like, I guess, February of 1980. Everything that happened. Imagine, 2.5 months.
Wow.
So Willie takes her out, and she's so afraid of being with a man that she brings a cousin with her. She won't even let him kiss her goodnight. He takes her to these wonderful restaurants she'd never been to. He takes her to get new clothes that fit her as opposed to what she could get secondhand. He took her to the beauty salon. He bought her expensive perfume. And she, was like, maybe I can start to trust someone now. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So this briefcase he carried with him all the time. They would be at a restaurant and someone would come in and he would excuse himself from the table and go talk to someone and then come back and join Blanche at dinner. And she would say, "Who is that?" And he would say, "Oh, it's a client."
A client.
It's a client. But then she noticed sometimes the clients would meet them in parking lots. Which happens a lot with attorneys.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Meet me at the photomat.
Uh-huh.
So one day he opens the trunk of his car, and he changed cars quite often, which she thought meant, he has money.
Sure.
She catches a glimpse in the trunk of a rifle. And she says to herself, I get it. Attorneys deal with crappy clients sometimes. You might need to protect yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
I
All
know.
right.
Yeah. And she's like, I started to get a little bit more inquisitive about his clients. And he was like, yeah, everything, it's fine. They're just, I need to protect myself. And she, buys it. Everything changed in November of 1979. They're driving around the Bronx, and he kept driving around this same block over and over again. And he said, "Oh, I'm looking for a friend I'm supposed to meet here." And then at some point he pulls over and says, "Hey, go ask that man what time it is." And he was about to walk into an apartment building. And Blanche, walks up, and she said, I guess I'm just supposed to obey. And maybe he is here early and he just wants to find out what time it is. And she approaches the man, asks him for the time. And as he turned toward her, she hears a whisper of air. And then the man falls in front of her. And she turns around and sees Willie Sanchez holding a pistol with a silencer.
Wow.
And
so she was the bait.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
And this isn't the last time that he does this.
Oh, boy.
She was like, what just happened? Did Willie just shoot this man? And she feels him grabbing her by the back of the clothing and drags her back to the car. And she was totally petrified and turned to him and said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm the same man who's been looking out for you."
Oh, God.
I know.
Oh,
exactly.
No.
So I don't know if you know this yet, but Willie Sanchez is not his name. His real name is Robert Young.
Okay.
And 2 years earlier, he had been known as inmate 76-A-4463. And he was being held at the Matawan State Hospital for the criminally insane.
Oh, my God.
North of New York City.
So not an attorney.
Not at all.
The other side.
The other side.
Of
yeah.
the law.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. He had been indicted for climbing into a window of a 23-year-old woman in the Bronx, raped her when she resisted. Oh, no. He shot her in the head and then sodomized her dead body.
Oh, Jesus.
She was 23. He was 33.
Oh, my God.
A police psychologist said, "This is the craziest killer I've ever seen." In 1977, 10 inmates from this prison for the criminally insane managed to cut through 3 sets of bars at the hospital. They all escaped into the darkness. One of them was Robert Young. Bloodhounds and police helicopters picked up everyone else in Dutchess County, but Mr. Young.
He was the only one.
He remained at large. Maybe 8-10 months later, he's eventually arrested in St. Louis in 1978. He had in his car a few things like a hand grenade. He's transport.
Sure.
Yeah,
That
sure.
makes
A
sense.
lot of attorneys use hand grenade from
Uh-huh.
World War II, the PTSD or something.
Yeah.
So he's transported back to Dutchess County to stand trial for the escape, and he's in the courthouse jail, which is on the 4th floor. And no one noticed that he had been hiding sheets under his clothing.
Oh, geez.
And he makes a
Oh,
rope.
no.
And while everyone else in the prison watches, he lowers himself down out of the window. He climbs into an open window, and it happens to be the district attorney's office, the same DA who's prosecuting him for the escape.
No. Oh,
But the
my
room was vacant.
God.
So he walks through the front door and asks a secretary at the front desk, could you give me directions out of the building? I'm new here.
Oh, my God.
She points the way out, and it takes an hour for the officers to notice he's missing. And 6 months
He's
later,
gone.
he meets Blanche Wright at her
God.
birthday party.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So after he shot the man on the street, he wouldn't let Blanche out of his sight because she knows too much now.
Sure.
He made her leave her son with her grandmother and moved her out of that apartment she was living in and moved her in with 2 quote unquote friends. It's a couple named Rosie and Jean, and he didn't want her to be alone. And he said the reason why is she wasn't safe.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, from him.
Uh-huh.
He locked her in the bedroom for days at a time. He would return with bricks of cocaine, which Rosie and Jean would cut to sell. And Blanche was just afraid the entire time she was there. And if she showed any sort of fear, Willie would explode in rage and then make it worse.
Wow.
Rosie says to Blanche one day, look, this is what helps me, and offer her some cocaine. And she says, I tried it. I came out of being totally trapped, that feeling of being trapped and gloomy. And she said, you know what? They do care about me. She said it made her feel strong. She said it took me out of feeling lousy.
Man.
At one point, Willie takes her to a Holiday Inn and handcuffs her to the bathroom sink. He closes the door, and a few hours later, she hears some women talking in the hotel room, and she thought about calling out for help, but then she changed her mind. She hesitated. After they left, the bathroom door opens, and he unties her and says, you did good. You didn't make a sound. Now I know I can trust you.
Test. Oh,
yep.
God.
She tried to think of a way out, and she saw one chance, and that was to go back to the only person who'd shown her kindness, which was Miss Richardson of the group home. They had stayed in touch, and she takes Willie to meet her. She's like, hey, I want you to meet a really wonderful woman who helped me in my life. So she takes Willie to meet her. They go in, and Miss Richardson is like, oh, it looks like you've met a wonderful guy. I'm so happy things are working out. And they're sitting in a small group in the living room. And Willie Sanchez looks around at all the walls and the ceiling, and he says, I don't see any security here. Somebody could come in here and kill you and all of these girls.
Oh, no.
She knew, oh no, he gets it. He knows what I'm trying to do. I messed up. And I know I'm not going to let anything happen to Miss Richardson.
Oh.
A few minutes later, they're in the kitchen getting drinks and snacks. And she said, is everything okay? I mean, you look like you have this great guy in your life. And she says, yeah, everything's fine. When they leave, as they're walking out to the car, Willie says, I'm God, right? I decide who lives and dies.
Wow.
And she said, that's when I knew I was really trapped. I don't know how to get out. And I'm going to die with this guy.
God.
January 21st of 1980, almost 2 months after the murder of the man on the street, Willie drives Blanche to the home of a friend on Marion Avenue in the Bronx. That friend is later described as a Colombian cocaine trafficker. He was in there with a woman, and Blanche was just so traumatized, she just sat and looked at an aquarium with fish swimming around. Soon after they arrive, there's a fight that breaks out in Spanish, and Willie and the man get into a fight, and he throws the man to the ground and handcuffs him. He hands Blanche a pistol with a silencer and says, if he moves, shoot him.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Everyone's screaming. He pushes the woman into the bedroom. A few minutes later, she hears that same whoosh noise of the silencer, and she knew that he had killed the woman. He comes back and sees the man squirming on the floor and says to her, "Didn't I tell you to not let him move?"
Oh, no.
He wraps his hand around her hand, which is holding the pistol, and pulls the trigger. And then there's a knock at the door, and Willie opens it, and someone was coming to see what the noise was about, and he shot that man where he stood, and he's dead.
Wow.
The man on the floor is still alive, but the woman in the bedroom and the man at the door are both killed. Blanche said, Willie said to her, "I know you can do better. If you want to live, you have to do better."
Jeez.
So she continues to use cocaine. It's now February of 1980, and it's a couple weeks after all of those murders, and they're back in a different car, and they are going toward Mount Kisco, which is in Westchester County, just north of the Bronx. It was February 7th of 1980. They arrive at these two towering apartment complexes on Sawmill River Parkway, and Willie presses a gun into her hand, and he said, "There's people in there who want to kill us."
Us.
Us.
Oh, boy.
So he says, "There's two men. You're going to kill one, and I'll kill the other." And she refused to get out of the car. And all night long, he badgered her, he yelled, he screamed, and she would not get out of the car. The next day at 10 a.m., he sees the two men he's looking for come out of the towers, and he pushes her out of the car. She is walking slightly ahead of her, and the two men are approaching, and one of the men seems to recognize Willie over her shoulder, and he pushes Blanche to the ground. And they still don't know if he assumed she was just an innocent person walking in front of Willie or if she was part of it too. They think maybe he was trying to protect her from what was about to happen, because there is a shootout. And Blanche crawls toward a maintenance closet that's on the street of the apartment complex. She got inside. She hears all the gunfire. She pokes her gun outside of the door and fires one single blind shot, and all the gunfire ceases.
Oh, wow.
One shot,
So
blindly.
One shot.
She hears screaming, and she stayed in the closet until the screaming stopped. And then she got out. She crawled out. She sees two men on the ground, one of the targets that Willie wanted to kill, and Willie is bleeding and seems unable to get up. He told her to put the guns back in the car. She picked them up and walked out in a daze, and she said, "I don't know what to do without him."
Oh, geez.
She headed down the street and went to her own apartment, her old apartment in the Bronx. 4 days later, the police knock at the door. They questioned her overnight with no representation. She signs a confession on Valentine's Day, February 14th of 1980 at 5:45 a.m. Willie died. So did his target. And the target was Marshall Howell, who was a drug dealer with more guns than police could count and $200,000 in cash in his apartment, which we're talking, 1980.
Right.
When police arrive with a warrant, the two men might have shot each other, or maybe Blanche's lone round struck Mr. Howell, but there is no report that says what actually happened, who shot who.
Wow.
It's when she's being questioned that she finds out that Willie Sanchez is Robert Young. She learned he had committed, murders in the past, and he had escaped from jail twice, that he worked for an organized crime group called the Council.
Okay.
And they were these drug dealing kingpins of Harlem, and he was their contract killer.
Wow.
Yeah. The clients he was meeting in restaurants and in parking lots were clients who were hiring him as a hitman.
Sure.
And they accused Blanche of being his partner. They told me I was a contract killer. They called us Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, my God.
She goes to Rikers after her arrest, and another inmate had heard about her and said, "There ain't no guns in here now, hit woman."
Oh my God. Okay.
She stopped speaking again, and she just tucked herself in. However, a criminal defense attorney from a really prestigious firm, like where F. Lee Bailey was one of the partners, shows up and replaces her court-appointed attorney. That attorney had also helped in the defense of Patty Hearst and the Boston Strangler.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Sounds expensive.
Yeah, I wonder how she paid.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, wait, she didn't pay.
Yeah.
His fees are covered by the two men that she met through Robert Young, who worked at the council.
Yeah.
She didn't know who they were at the time, but that attorney sped her through the legal process. But on top of everything else, while she's going through this, she finds out she's pregnant with Willie Sanchez / Robert Young's child.
Oh, boy.
5 months after her arrest, she gives birth to a baby boy, and she's shackled to a hospital bed because he had escaped twice. They thought she would too. And the baby boy is whisked away from her.
Oh.
She ended up pleading guilty to murder and was sentenced to 18 years to life. Jesus. She was sent to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, the state's largest all-woman maximum security prison. It's in Westchester County. It's surrounded by woods. As she's arriving, she hears an inmate say, "I can't wait to meet her. I hear she's a badass."
Wow.
She again just kept to herself, wouldn't speak. She slinked into the inmate population, hoping no one would notice. Elaine Lord, who was the prison's superintendent through most of the 80s and the 90s, said she just kind of shrank into the wall. However, 2 years after her arrest, and she has followed the rules completely, she is allowed to enter the honor unit. And she starts going to group therapy. She listens to former prostitutes who talk about, being given expensive gifts and taken nice places,
right,
and the affection their pimps offered, and then later turn abusive.
Right.
And she thought, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
She said, I knew I needed help with all the crap in my head. I needed to get well. So she takes this opportunity when she hears the inmates complaining about their clothes. There's shirts, coats, pants, and boots that they're allowed to get as gifts from family members, but they're all on an approved list, and it's all clothing for men.
Oh, in the women's prison, they're only allowed to wear men's clothes. Oh.
It's an approved list.
Yeah.
And they're all complaining about these crappy clothes.
Ill-fitting and uncomfortable. Yeah, okay.
So she says, you know what? I have an idea of how we can quietly protest. So she finds the list of approved things that your families can send you. And it's within the prison's rules, but she found a chink in the armor. She looked at the list and came up with something that, we can get, and this will show our displeasure with the clothing. 2 things that were approved for inmates to have as gifts are jock straps and pipes.
Oh, boy.
Smoking is still allowed at that time.
Okay.
In the prison. So all of these packages start arriving, and the women puff on pipes and wear jock straps like bandanas.
Oh, boy.
She said one day she remembered standing in line, and she looked behind her and she saw a row of like 40 or 45 women wearing jock straps on their head.
That's a good protest. That's
I think
funny.
It's amazing.
That's awesome.
And it's not, what are they going to do? You're allowed these things. You can use them how you want.
Right.
Yeah. So corrections officers start paying attention. They're like, what's going on? And they open a conversation, and it turns out the corrections officers listen. So they put women's pants on the list of approved clothing. And she said, I felt like I was becoming a quiet leader.
Cool.
She never took credit, but the other inmates respected her and said, we know you did this. You enacted this change. Wow. She said, I am a monster and I deserve to be here.
Oh, God.
She was elected to represent inmates in grievous interactions with prison officials. She even started a micro business in the prison, selling cosmetics to inmates, and all of the proceeds go toward recreation programs for the women.
Wow.
She became more and more involved in prison life. She even worked with a group called Family Violence Program and Puppies Behind Bars, which trains guide dogs for the blind.
Oh,
And she said, I got so much energy and joy out of helping the population in prison. I felt like somebody for the first time in my entire life.
that's amazing.
She said, I began to see I could be a change for others if I put my mind to it. I felt more free than I had in my entire life.
Wow.
She said that feeling went away when she was alone or she was asked to talk about her crimes. She would shut down. And the person who headed the violence program, the family violence program, Sharon Smolik, said, you know what? You deserve to care about yourself too, not just others. And she would say, yeah, you know what? Just forget about me. You can move on to the next person.
Oh, no. God.
So she faces parole for the first time in 1997. It's denied, which is not unusual for a convicted murderer. That's 17 years, I guess, after she had been convicted.
Wow.
So every 2 years, as scheduled, she arrives in front of the parole board. 1999, 2001, 2003, 2005, 2007. Always denied. And she said, I wasn't really disappointed because I never expected to be paroled. I really deserve to be here. I'm a monster.
Oh, my God.
So she became close with an advocate for battered women named Charlotte Watson, and she had opened a shelter outside the prison called My Sister's Place. It's kind of a like a halfway house. When you leave prison, it's a place to go before you are integrated back into society. And in 2009, Charlotte approaches Blanche and says, I want to know if you're ready to go home. And Charlotte writes dozens of letters to friends of Blanche's, colleagues, people who had heard of Blanche, people who had not heard of her, and explained her story. And she got back letters from Elaine Lord, the former superintendent of the prison, who said, the Blanche Wright I met in 1982 has evolved from a withdrawn, silent individual into a serious, determined, capable adult who has taken advantage of every opportunity for self-growth.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Beautiful. A retired lieutenant from the prison said, inmate Wright is a special case. She deserves a chance at the brass ring. A prosecutor even wrote on her behalf, I have never once written a letter in support of release of an inmate. There were letters that came from a state senator, a nun, a Zen master, and Charlotte hands over all of these letters in a binder to the parole board. She's facing 3 parole commissioners on October 20th of 2009. And she talked about meeting Robert Young. I thought he was a lawyer, a nice guy. I thought my life could turn around. I was completely broken. I was emotionally unstable, mentally unstable, and completely underdeveloped mentally. She spoke about the killings and said, there's not a day that goes by that I don't hurt and think about what I've done. And we're not even sure she did anything. Yeah. She said she spent her first several years in prison praying for a terminal illness.
Wow.
And she said, nothing that I prayed for came about. I guess God didn't want me to go right then. Her parole was granted. And as she walks out of the prison, women were screaming out of the windows. She said women were taking out garbage and they stopped and started cheering and clapping. She now lives outside of New York, outside of the city. And once a month, she makes the trip to Prospect Lefferts Garden in Brooklyn, which is where the halfway house is. And she is a regular visitor at Providence House, which is another halfway house for female inmates who are completing their sentences there. She said most of her friends are people she knew from prison. She doesn't go out a lot. She doesn't socialize. And she said she still looks over her shoulder in panic when she talks about meeting Willie Sanchez.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael Wilson rang her doorbell and said, can we talk about what happened to you? And she said, let me think about this. She was very reluctant to talk about herself. But a few days later, she said, you know what? I've outweighed the positive impact I could have by telling my story against me not wanting to talk about it. Maybe there will be some battered women who read it and realize they're not alone.
Right.
When she first left the prison, she did live at Providence House, and she still works with young women that are returning to society. And she tells them things that she wishes someone had told her. If your boyfriend says, oh, your hair would look better like this, that's a light bulb that should go off because there's more coming. But you don't see it that way. You're flattered because we're needy and we're desperate to be loved.
Wow.
Yeah. What a beautiful story. Here's this woman who has taken terrible things in her life and turned them around. And not only that, helps other people.
Yeah. So much strength.
Yeah.
Wow.
To get through it. Can you imagine going from praying for a terminal illness so you can die and get away from this life to being like a quiet leader in prison? Yeah, she's an amazing person. And you know what? I think I'm obviously sure that this is not a story that's rare. I think it happens a lot.
Oh, sure.
You come from a difficult background, and I think, abusers sniff you out and they find you.
Right.
And if you were a victim, no matter what you try to do, they try to bring you back to that.
Right. Keep you
Yeah, to keep you under their control. It's a weird cycle. And all I can do is hope that if someone is in that sort of situation, that they find some strength like Blanche did. There is help.
Absolutely.
It may be hard at first, but you can get out. And there is a national domestic abuse hotline, which is 1-800-799-7233. 1-800-799-7233. If you or anyone you know is experiencing abuse like you've heard that Blanche went through, and we've probably all known someone who's gone through something like that, I hope you're not afraid to reach out. And if you have a tip on a missing person or unsolved homicide, or just want to suggest a case, please give us a call at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. You can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can find us on any of the social media platforms, just the Tipsters Facebook page, at JT Tipsters on Instagram, at JT Tipsters Pod on Twitter, and more cowbell.
If you would like to support this podcast and get early access and other cool murderous swag, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.